Have you ever had a nightmare so scary that it felt real? You feel your emotions becoming intertwined with all the fear, negativity, and stress that comes along with it. You wake up and you feel a rush of relief through your body as you realize it was just a dream. Now imagine having a nightmare, and in this nightmare, you see people on suicide watch hanging themselves. You see gang members beat other people without any repercussions, and you see people crying out for medical attention being ignored, so much so that they set their living space on fire in an act of desperation. Well, according to an article written in 2018 by Timothy Williams called Inside a Private Prison, Blood, Suicide, and Poorly Paid Guards, this is not a nightmare. This is reality for people residing in private for-profit prisons. In the 1980s, mass incarceration skyrocketed in the United States, catapulting the nation as the #1 spot in the entire world for housing the most inmates. This became an issue when there was no longer any space in the prisons. Thereafter, according to an article titled Pros and Cons of Private Prisons, published by the Criminal Justice Programs, a company named Corrections Corporations of America emerged, promising to provide relief for this problem. They wanted to open up private prisons, and by doing so, we're going to create more space in addition to running at lower costs. However, running at lower costs also means less prison guards. Less prison guards meant that they were seeking inmates who were incarcerated for non-violent crimes in order to mitigate the violence that would go on in these prisons. However, there is still exposure to violence. And with the increased exposure to violence and corruption that these inmates receive, it's more likely that they will partake in these kind of behaviors once they are released into society. In addition, if these rates keep increasing, it will also increase the money that taxpayers pay each year to keep these prison systems running. For-profit prisons need to be abolished for the safety and well-being of everyone. As a political science major, I focus my research on the equality and fair treatment of everyone residing in the United States. Over the past year, I've examined the inequalities and injustices going on in the prison system in order to bring them to light in an attempt to make change. I'm going to start off by talking about exactly why for-profit prisons need to be eradicated. Then I'm going to continue with a solution to this problem, and I'm going to end it explaining what this means to you and how this can change your life. For-profit prisons need to be reevaluated for what they are today in order to completely get rid of them. These prisons are deemed as immoral and dangerous. According to the article Pros and Cons of Private Prisons, due to budget cuts and less prison guards, there are 49% more violent incidents that occur in these prisons, and these violent incidents can be inmate on inmate crime or inmate on guard crime. In addition, for-profit prisons are an aid to institutionalized racism. In 2014, Rena Palta wrote an article titled Why For-Profit Prisons House More Inmates of Color, where she claimed that there are even more racial disparities in private prisons than there are in publicly run ones. Back to mass incarceration. The war on drugs started in the 1980s, and it targeted minorities and gave them long prison sentences for non-violent drug crimes. This becomes almost parallel to the type of inmates that these for-profit prisons seek. And since they are non-violent crimes, it is most likely that these are the inmates who are going to be released back into society. And most importantly, they are not running at a lower cost as they initially promised. According to the article Pros and Cons of Private Prisons, in 2010 it was found that to house a medium security inmate, it cost $48.42 per day in the public prisons. Meanwhile, in the private prisons, it cost $53.02, meaning it's more to run these private prisons than it is to do the public ones. Now that I've talked about exactly why these prisons need to be eradicated, I want to talk about a solution, because there is one. Overall, there needs to be prison reform in order to effectively get rid of these for-profit prisons. Companies are currently capitalizing off of mass incarceration, so we need to get to the root of the problem and prevent mass incarceration rates from increasing. In addition, reevaluations of the programs that are currently in place to rehabilitate the inmates is also going to help their mental health, as well as improve the safety of the communities that they are released into. But aside from that, The time that inmates receive for nonviolent crimes also needs to be reevaluated. This will eventually reduce the population, getting rid of the need for these for-profit prisons. These for-profit prisons did not exist until the 1980s. And the reason I bring that up is because that's not that long ago. This means that it is feasible for lawmakers and politicians to come together to create a change and stop the rates from increasing and the need for for-profit prisons. And now that I've talked about a solution to this problem, I wanted to explain what this solution means to your future. Implementing prison reform will not only be good for the prisoners, but also everyone else. By improving mental health, it will improve their mental state and just create more safety for when they are released. As well as reducing the sentences, as I said before, not only will that reduce the population, eliminating the need for these for-profit prisons, it will also create a better home, a better and healthy home for children suffering from parental incarceration. These innocent children will have a better chance at not falling into the cycle and ending up in prison themselves. However, if no changes take place and the mental health of these inmates continues to deteriorate, meanwhile, the taxes that taxpayers pay annually is going to increase. And that is $38.8 billion that we pay annually to keep these prison systems running. And rates are increasing, meaning if it continues to go the way it is, you're going to have to pay more. All in all, I hope you guys leave today enlightened by the detrimental effects of for-profit prisons and are inspired to come together to create change. I was able to talk about exactly why for-profit prisons need to be outlawed, as well as a solution to the problem, and I concluded by painting a picture of what this means for everyone's future. We need to look at the bigger picture here. Right now, the United States is known for having a mass incarceration problem, and that's not an accurate representation of who we are. By eliminating for-profit prisons using prison reform, it will create a trickle effect, making more contributing members to society. And what this means is it's going to push the nation forward that will slowly erase the view of mass incarceration that everyone has about us. But there are ways that you too can get involved. You can continue to educate yourself, and you can even join local justice reform efforts. But most importantly, make your voice heard with your political representatives. Right now, more than ever, it's important to create equality and justice in the United States, and you have the power to be part of historic change. Thank you.